when doomsday comes, someone has a palm shoot in his hand, you should plant it. So suggesting that, you know, it may be the end of the world, but you should never, it's not lost for mankind. You should always continue the growth. Okay, fine, you've got, you know there's creator. You know there's a natural disposition to things, the way that things are. You know things are put into balance, right? If you tilt the balance, where's the responsibility? So we have many verses in the Quran and the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, the responsibility principle. So, you know, you as mankind, you have a responsibility. In fact, there are explicit verses in the Quran and the saying, for example, one of them, mankind has been put as a guardian on earth. Not as above creation, not below creation, but as a shepherd. Corruption has occurred on the earth because of man's action. We're going to taste them a consequence of their actions. So corruption has occurred on the sea and the earth, and as a result of these actions, man is going to be tasting the consequence. So we see the environmental malaise at the moment, you know, where man has gone beyond when he's altered the creation, when he's altered the balance. There's a reaction, and God is punishing man here on this earth. And obviously, if he doesn't accept his failings, he'll be punished in the hereafter. But that's a theological belief. So, for example, in the Quran, you weren't allowed to build on floodplains. It was quite explicit. You weren't allowed. We had designated zones of conservation known as himas in Arabic, which are looked after by the Sharia scholars, who made sure certain amounts of there was certain amount for fallow, crop rotation. You weren't allowed to cut trees or kill the animals. Certain amounts of hunting was allowed because of the ecosystem keeping the balance in place, because man has its place in the ecosystem, you see. And these are quite Quranic injunctions and prophetic sayings as well, you see. And this is quite ingrained in the Sharia. So if one was to look within the Muslim tradition, everywhere in the Muslim world, this is before colonialism, unfortunately, we used to have himas all around the Muslim world. The whole east coast of Indonesia, before Sukarno, before the Dutch came and colonized, it used to be under the Sultanate, and the whole east coast of Aceh, where the mangroves were. If you look at the mangroves, you weren't allowed to cut the mangroves according to the local Sharia texts there, because the mangroves, you see, were a trust for the community. It provided the cash crops, which led to, you know, job and employment and a sustainable living life. But at the same time, the mangroves were also, in our tradition, it also had a place where it was a natural barrier against a tsunami. You see, and since you know, this modern day nationalistic state, you know, we're here to, you know, profit maximize. Nobody really cares about the mangroves. So, you know, what we're trying to do, we're trying to revive this tradition. Within the Sharia itself, within the Muslim, you know, we had conservation inspectors, as I said. These were Muslim scholars. Again, this has been a lost tradition in the Muslim theology, you see. That's what we're trying to say to the Muslim world, the Muslim scholars. You need to go back to your theology. When we went to the Muslim world, for example, one of our key projects was in Zanzibar, which was a recent one, where the local Muslim fishermen in East Africa, a valley off the coast of Zanzibar, it's called the Misali Valley. The fishermen were actually using dynamites to actually get the fish out, and obviously that led to a massive depletion in the fish stocks. The WWF was there, Care International was there, and because they were local fishermen, and for centuries they were using the Islamic principle, but they lost that tradition. WWF couldn't really do much. Then they approached us. We went there with the verses of the Quran, with the theology. And the guys from WWF said, you did something for many years, we can do it in one day, because we connected it to their theology, you see, because people live their theology there. Unlike the developed nations, we're sort of in a secular developed nation, very materialistic, we're very far from the world. Even when we have our seminaries, or when we have our churches, or when we have our mosques and temples, it's very far remote from the actual the environment, the world. So we talk about theology, but we can't really contextualize it. You know, do you understand what I'm trying to say? See, it made immediately the imams in his sermon told the fishermen, you can't do this. It's haram. You're gonna be. The word is, you're going to be sinful. So immediately the fishermen said, look, we're not going to go and use dynamite. We're going to be sufficed with 2 or 3 fishes as opposed to 5 or 6. Okay. In a few years, that actually led to the fish stocks coming back. And then what we're saying is it's nothing scientific. There's no conspiracy theory here. It's just you just telling the people to live according to their lives, you see. I mean, we all know how guilty America and some developing nations are, but also you've got to understand the Muslim countries are very into it as well. Let's not forget that. Some of the Central Asian countries, some of the dictators there, and some of the dictatorial regimes in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, some of the OPEC countries, their lawyers were there obstructing to the whole Kyoto Protocol. There is hope, but I think the whole climate change thing needs to be more broad-based. We need to be more creative in how we actually get the issue back. It has to be about sustainable development, but again, we have to look at the root. Sustainability is now a buzzword, but is that a buzzword to really humiliate people, not to allow them to grow? Because that's a lot of the problems back in people in Bangladesh or India or back in Africa or wherever they are. People want some of the... Maybe we need to reduce our consumption. It's calling for a reduction of a consumer-led society. That's a big thing, you know. It's a big thing. Unfortunately, because of certain countries' policies, anything coming from the West now is seen as a neo-colonial agenda. Now, it's very difficult to convince, for example, me, but they're more likely to listen to me than to someone who's white, middle class, of a non-Muslim faith. So what we're saying, if you really want a lot of the developing nations, you see, that's far more powerful. They're more likely to listen because the damage has been done for some, you know, unfortunately, it's very, very difficult, you know, and it's frustrating. It's really frustrating because you see, unfortunately, the Green Movement has been labelled as a very secular movement. You know, unfortunately, I mean, people believe it's a religion in itself, you know, so fair enough. But if you want to get to a lot of the developing nations, especially the Muslim nations, where a lot of the resources are, ironically, you know, I mean, it's a sad thing. A lot of the resources, minerals, oil, gas, are in the Muslim nations. You know, if you want to reach out to them saying, look, for the betterment of all creation, okay, this is what your faith says. Many scholars say the brother is a brother in humanity, not just a Muslim. So we should use theology to empower people to look for the good of people. Unfortunately, there's too much theology. I mean, just to quote Jonathan Swift, there's too much religion about hate, not enough. We've got more about religion to love. It's a shame we don't even talk about that, you know, and there's so much commonality. And I really believe that the environmental issues are the thing that's going to bring us together. There's not going to be nothing else, but we have to realise, look, it's linked to war, you know, guns, unfortunately. It's linked to big corporate multinationals. Okay, it's dirty business, as I told you. The people, I mean, it's not just America who's against the Kyoto Protocol. It's a lot of these Arab regimes. You know, it means it's the end of their. It means the end of their billions. You know, the people suffering.